I am someone who is a big dreamer, and I have lots of ideas, and I can move towards dreams and believe in them with great gusto and, put myself behind a vision. I'm a doer. And so for myself, with the word hope, there's also a shadow side that isn't really articulated in language that I wanted to give voice to. And it's this side of hope that can also hold delusion when we project our dreams onto a person, which a lot of us do in relationships. Like, I'm talking about intimate relationships,
Mhm.
and then not really being able to see the person who's right in front of us.
Welcome to the Small Steps, Big Wins podcast. I'm dedicated to helping you take control of your life. Together, we'll explore practical tips, expert advice, and inspiring stories to help you overcome obstacles and achieve your goals. Making small changes is possible and can lead to big results. Are you ready? Let's go do this. I want to welcome a very special guest today. And she's an author, a poet, educator, and she's now in a different season of life and wrote this amazing book called Life's Poetic Glossary. And we're going to dive into that and so much more. Rhiah, welcome.
Thank you so much. I've really been looking forward to this, and I'm so excited.
Me too. Me too. So let's start off by having you just give a little introduction about yourself.
Well, I'm going to start with where I'm at now. So I'm living in Los Angeles. I'm a dance fanatic. So I'm into tango and heels dancing. And I'm currently writing a memoir. That's going to be my next book project. But this latest book, Life's Poetic Glossary, is about, the way I see it is a playful invitation to reimagine the definitions of everyday words, to connect with that deeper truth of the lived experience in everyday words that we use all the time and don't really connect with. And so it's an opening for language to become transformational instead of transactional.
So let's talk about your book. I had an opportunity to read it. I'm so glad I did before we did this interview. What I found so intriguing about it was the way that you used the English language, as you said, to bring ordinary words, give them life and give them a different perspective. The book itself, just so the listeners know how it's structured, you go through the alphabet and you pick everyday words, and it's not just 26 words. The way you go through it, there's maybe a couple of A's in there, there's a couple of F's. So I didn't want them to think it's just like, oh, what are those kid alphabet books? It's definitely not. If for anything, the pictures are amazing. And if you're listening to this on a podcast and you have the opportunity to go to the YouTube video, you can actually see I'm holding one of them up here. I'll give you an opportunity to talk about the pictures because they're black and white and they look like x-rays. So back to the wordplay. For example, from the book, you define forgiveness. You have a couple different definitions, but one of them is forgiveness is to offer yourself compassion for not being able to see then what you can see now.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And when I read that, I thought, wow, when you think of forgiveness, you think of it as I did something wrong to somebody else, and it's transactional. Talk
Mm-hmm.
about your book. What inspired you to write your book?
Yeah, it's such a rich question that I could answer in many different angles,
Yeah.
but just to speak to, I think what really I was connecting to was this opportunity to voice the unvoiced nuances of words like forgiveness. And for me, in much of my own experience in life and healing and being a voracious learner of transformation and growth and wanting to be my best self, I think some of the moments that have been hardest for me have been self-forgiveness and not knowing at many intersections of my life, what is that? How do I get through it? And now, after being through a few gateways of forgiveness, my own personal connection to that word has transformed.
Mm.
And so I wanted to give voice to the more generative relationship that I have with the word forgiveness now that I didn't have before. Before, it seemed like a mysterious thing that was out there to either I think we often all hear things like, forgive yourself and the other person to set yourself free. And
Mm,
that if you're hanging on to anger and resentment, then you're only causing harm to yourself. And so we know on some level that moving towards forgiveness is a good idea, but what does it actually feel like? And what does it actually mean when, or to ourselves, and how do we relate to that as we're going through it,
mhm,
and really finding the place in our hearts where we can offer more space and grace for our missteps. And just to speak to the line that you just read, is to offer the compassion for ourselves for not being able to see then what we could see
mhm.
now, whether it's hurting someone else or ourselves or both.
Yeah.
And so it's, instead of, an alternative could be beating ourselves up, right, for
Mhm.
something,
Sure.
lamenting about something, wishing something was different. So the inspiration was really for me to give voice and acknowledgement to these words that have a lived experience in them that's so much richer than the word itself as we use it between each other.
Yeah.
When we
Yes.
mean different things too, my association with forgiveness might be different than yours.
Sure,
So,
sure. You write about all these other words. I'll just pick a couple of them out here, like listening, longing, pleasure, humility. The word horrible, that one was very intriguing when I read that.
mhm.
Hope, harmony, guilt, all of these words. How did you choose the words that you chose? And did they resonate with you in order to choose them?
Oh, so thank you. This is such a satisfying question for me to answer.
Sure.
Thank you for such
Welcome.
an incisive question. I chose the words that I chose because I realized for myself there was a richer, deeper meaning to the word that people don't normally talk about, or that isn't assumed, or that is disregarded or unacknowledged. And so, like the word hope, for example, I am someone who is a big dreamer, and I have lots of ideas, and I can move towards dreams and believe in them with great gusto, and put myself behind a vision. I'm a doer. And so for myself, with the word hope, there's also a shadow side that isn't really articulated in language that I wanted to give voice to. And it's this side of hope that can also hold delusion when we project our dreams onto a person, which a
Mhm,
lot of us do in relationships. Like, I'm talking about intimate relationships,
mhm.
and then not really being able to see the person who's right in front of us, as an example. Projecting the romance of what we want our perfect love life to be onto the person we're with, when
Yeah.
they don't even have, or they're just, their qualities are not actually representing what we're projecting onto them.
Mm,
So just using hope again as an example, there were all these different levels of what I needed to learn about how I was relating to my own sense of hope,
mm,
that I wanted to, in a way, call out. Like, oh, this is kind of the tricky path with hope, is
mhm.
that I can easily project, even my ideas of what it means to be happy onto a place or a thing. Like, well, once I have that job, or once I do this thing, then I'll be happier or happy. Not that that's not true, but it's not the full truth. So
Mhm.
it's kind of, I wanted to choose and kind of marinate with the words that I felt lacked voice, with those other nuances that I have lived in my own life. So
Have you always been fascinated with language? It seems like in order to write a book like this that has that depth, and it does, like it's not just taking those everyday things and putting them on the superficial. Like, how do you cultivate your relationship with words? Do you remember where that started, or are you just always fascinated?
I do. I do have some connections there. And So I'm Canadian and I grew up in Calgary. I went to a bilingual school, which not everybody in English speaking Canada does, but my mom had the foresight to put me in a bilingual program. So I was learning a second language from a young age that was never spoken home from home. My my family has no French associations. And so I was learning French, and then I also had exposure to German because my dad is a German immigrant, Canadian, is Canadian, but a German immigrant. And so I was learning just the odd word from him, not a lot, but enough to get the sense that even the musicality of the way my dad would say things in English and then to hear words in German, they transmitted such a different energy than the
Mm.
English language, and same with French. So, like, I'll give you an example. There's a German word, it's schrecklich, which means it's awful. Like, it's just, appallingly awful. And this musicality of schrecklich. Ach, das ist schrecklich. You
Yeah, you can hear the
feel
energy.
it's like an undeniable like disdain or disgust,
Yeah,
kind of
yeah.
unacceptable expression of something, whatever
Yeah.
is being qualified as that.
Oh,
And
fascinating.
my dad's nature really had this very definitive kind of quality to it. So I knew that there was something behind his cultural point of view that was very different from what my my other friends' fathers had. And so I was awake, I think, from a very young age, about awake to how different culture involves language, but further than that, expression, and how the musicality of expression really seeps into our bones in very different ways.
Yeah, and
So
you
I'm
wow.
fascinated by
That
language for that reason.
wow, and you know what? I keep coming back to your book, but that does come out through the book. That's why I asked the question because it was
Oh,
just the book was so fascinating on the play on words. Your journey is incredibly diverse from environmental science to acting. You have a trauma therapy background and then founding a retreat business. What's been the common thread or the driving force for you that connects these seemingly different paths that led you to where you are today?
freedom, freedom. Everything I think that I've chose in my life has in some way, shape, or form been driven by a deep desire to feel freedom. And um, let me see if I can say more about that. It started as an external freedom, wanting to be free financially and also free in spirit.
Mm,
And so my journey from working a corporate job as an or environmental advisor was my official role, but I was working for getting pipeline projects approved.
mm,
So it was like using my intelligence and creativity towards, in a way, doing a lot of research that was counter in the systemic way what I believed in and what I was passionate about. So I really wanted to use my creativity and my gifts of storytelling, and I've always had a very strong connection with my emotional life in a way that could help people. And I found it was too boxed in the corporate world, but also in that role. So there was a desire also to be, I think, in service in the world in a greater way that has been a connective tissue. To what degree I was aware of that or not at different times has varied, but it always usually comes down to that, like wanting to offer of myself for something that's bigger than me. And
mm,
I felt that with acting through storytelling, there's such an opportunity to affect other people's life experience through kind of having distance from their own life and seeing someone else's story
mm.
and getting like this armchair healing effect. So, not needing to go through that themselves, but being able to reflect on different options of decision making from the story they're witnessing. And then, I mean, becoming a trauma therapist was really informed by my own healing journey
Mm,
and wanting to offer support to others that was seemed so intangible to me at the time.
mm.
And the retreat house was very closely linked. It was to provide a place for people to dive into transformation or their greatest vision together. They're all in a way linked with this desire to be in service of change and ultimately to live my freest life as well.
Well, that's interesting because freedom, when we hear that word, so let's go to the play
Yeah.
on words. What does freedom mean to you then?
Ooh, such a good question. Freedom for me means the word that comes to me is to be in accountable to myself and only to myself. And the word that comes to me is self-agency. And so that
Mm,
I can be sovereign to myself and not operating in reaction to what's happening around me or with others in a reactive mode. And that's why I wrote the poem Sovereignty, which is in later in the book. But that represents to me freedom is when I am honoring myself, then I'm honoring all.
I was just looking to see if freedom was actually an F word. It's not there.
It's not, it's not.
But sovereignty is. We don't always equate the two, but freedom can take on a much deeper connotation
Yeah.
because you hear about different types of freedom. We hear being financially free, we hear about being free from time or free from place, and
Mhm.
freedom is just that very interesting word
So true. It
that
does have so many different associations to different people in different buckets of life as
Mhm.
well.
Sure,
Yeah.
sure. In reading your bio, you have courses that have to do with cultivating sensuality and sovereign intimacy. Before I ask my question, you want to talk about what sovereign intimacy is? And then why do you think reconnecting with our sensuality is so transformative, especially for
Hmm.
women?
Absolutely. So I'll answer your first question. So sovereign intimacy to me is to be in my own agency as I'm relating to someone else. So that means being true to the inner landscape that exists inside of me and honoring that while also honoring the person who's in front of me without needing to overpower myself in any way in order to merge with what their reality is.
Mm, okay.
So, and that sounds, even as I'm saying those words, it kind of sounds very abstract, but if I could give an example of what that looks like, it's basically being, I want to see if I can use an example that was recent. Oh, so here's an example. I was recently in a conversation where I felt shut down. And then I was hurt originally. So I'm having my lived experience of feeling impacted by the dynamic that was happening. And then I was clear about the reasons why I felt hurt, but then I came back with the clarity of what I would need in order to have a productive conversation would be to know, first of all, whether they would want to hear my opinion.
Mm,
And if it was welcome, then in what way would they like to hear it? Because I felt I had some value to offer. So it's in a way not asking the other person to change, but asking if they're open to engaging with me in a way that I would like to engage with them in.
mm.
So it's kind of been my whole life practice, and I am a student of this. I am really, really a student of this. I do not claim to be well seasoned in it, but it's what I'm very passionate about in cultivating in myself and in life, because there's so much freedom in that, in stepping out of the victim
Mhm.
role and coming into the role of being an advocate for ourselves in a way that
Mm.
doesn't overpower ourselves or others.
Thank you for defining that. So if I hear you, sovereign intimacy is really a connection with your inner self and
Yes.
finding that freedom within. When we hear the word intimacy, we often think of two people interacting
Yes.
and not a single, like yourself, a singular person, if that
Right.
makes sense. So sovereign intimacy is having that very deep connection to who you are deep down, apart from a partner or a friend or whoever else it is that you're interacting with. You mentioned about an inner landscape, and I found that those two words very interesting. What is your inner landscape, and how does one go about finding
Mm.
that inside of them?
So when I refer to my own inner landscape, I, I refer to it as a landscape because it's very vast. Usually, in one emotion or one experience, there are many notes to it. And so within that landscape, it's my lived experience. It's what I'm feeling and connecting with inside of myself. And there can be many layers to it, and many, just like the earth has many levels, there are many levels to this landscape inside. And there's usually a deeper truth beneath the feelings, the thoughts, the opinions, the perceptions, the projections that we have about ourselves and
Mm,
others. And so the inner landscape for me is honoring that all of those things exist as part of my experience inside when I'm feeling in my heart and my body. And that beneath that, there is also a deeper truth that's very still and steady and unwavering and very peaceful,
mm,
that can inform, how can I say this, that can inform a more broad perspective over just narrowing in on any one of those thoughts or any one of
mm,
those feelings within the
mhm,
landscape.
mhm. How can
That's
somebody use their inner landscape then to help them in, say, whatever circumstance they're in?
for myself, it's a lot about getting very still, and I'm a meditator, so it's been a staple in my life for a very long time. And getting still and closing my eyes and observing the thoughts.
Mm,
So a lot of it is cultivating that muscle of observing thoughts, observing experiences, and getting more distance from them so that there's not as much of a charge, especially around difficult emotions like anger
okay.
or sadness or grief. And then feeling that more steady state. I mean, I feel it as a really deep calm in myself that's
Mm,
beneath all of those things. And so I would say to get in touch with the inner landscape is to really commune with it and
mm,
become an observer of those thoughts, and that they don't define who we are. It's not who we are, even though we identify with so many of our thoughts all the time. And it's to see, I almost hesitate to say this because I don't want it to be reductive, but it's the who am I beyond my thoughts and my
mm,
emotions,
okay.
and being able to use that as a compass. So it's the observational mind, cultivating that, and
Mhm,
then trusting, really trusting in that deeper, more true voice that we all have, that deep
mhm.
knowing that we all have,
Yeah,
that we
yeah.
don't ever need to question.
Yeah, you know what? I find this idea fascinating about answering the question who we are.
Mm, mm,
And y- and sometimes for some people that's a hard question when you're not in that space of really looking inside of yourself or understanding that you can take yourself out of the situation to
mhm.
define who you are. How would you break that down to be more understanding for somebody who
Yeah.
just encountered the question of who are you really? And
Mhm.
how would we find that little authentic inner voice?
Yeah, that's a great question. again, I'll speak from myself and how I started to slowly find it for myself was to in starting to ask who am I without my fear?
Mm,
Like, who am I? And I would have never understood that even association with myself before until I really started to get calm with some of my thoughts and see them and to realize like they were thoughts that were coming from fear. So, for someone who really wants to get to know who they are beyond the thoughts and feelings that are not truly them, but generated by some pattern in their nervous system, which we all have, which is, wanting to stop us from experiencing anything bad ever in our lives from happening. To get beyond that voice, right, and
mhm,
to understand the who am I is to feel and connect with the sensations in the body that allow us to know that we're connected with that knowing, connecting with the sensations in the body that allow us to know that we're connecting with that knowing that's deeper, that is the who I am, my essence, above and beyond all the thoughts. And so, and I used to work with people in somatic exercises this way when I feel like I'll do it right now with myself. I'm feeling in my belly a very relaxed, open space that knows I'm safe. Well, how do I know I'm safe? Because I can feel a warmth settling around. It feels like my stomach lining. That's the physical
mhm.
sensation. And then just keep on going with that, of that inquiry of how do I know that I feel connected to myself right now? And you can track it really slowly. And as you do that, you commune and you solidify in your nervous system what that feels like. And so our animal bodies that are so used to being in survival mode and like, oh, something bad is going to happen, our bodies start to know something different, of this
Mm.
knowing and of this unquestionable sense of who we are beyond our bodies.
You mentioned before about meditation. What
Hmm.
role does meditation play in what we were talking about in that who are you or who are we question?
For me, it's so huge. And I think I mean, there's so many different ways to meditate. And that's, I think, also a personal kind of like clothing to try on for
Mhm,
each person. So for me, writing can be a meditation, dance can be a meditation. And it's all connected to me expressing what's inside and bringing it to the outside. Writing this book was a meditation. So it's whatever, if we are in movement with the meditation, whatever it is, it's that we are focused on that inner knowing and how we feel it in ourselves, in our bodies, and expressing at the same time. And if we're still in the still meditation, that communion with our knowing inside, for me, that's really who we are. Like that unquestionable,
wow.
just unwavering, steady ship inside that is unbreakable.
Yeah.
That's who we are. I mean, that's who I am.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Uh,
it's very difficult to put words to that who am I? It's very difficult.
your definition of meditation or the way you view it just absolutely sidelined my thoughts of meditation because you mentioned meditation could be a form of writing through journaling or it could be dance.
Mhm.
I appreciate that.
Thank you. Yeah, it was that understanding for me of moving meditation was one of the things that got me through one of the hardest times in my life. And it actually links to why sensuality is such an important part of anyone's life. But for I speak from a woman's perspective and identifying as a woman, I was someone who was very afraid of my sensuality for a
Mm,
lot of my life into my adulthood. And I was afraid of it because I thought if I fully expressed it, then I would be denied its full expression, or that I would
Mm.
be, yeah, or that, if I wanted to express myself one way, then someone else would have power over me. Because in a way, I was taught this dynamic in my childhood that, and I don't need to go into the whole story of my childhood trauma, but I will say that I learned in my own body's wiring that when I had stood up for myself as a very young child, saying no to an adult, that doesn't feel good to me and I don't want to do it. And then I was punished.
Oh,
With
okay.
the wiring in my body, that standing up for what feels good and right in my body is not okay, then I'm going to be, that's wrong, that's bad, I'm wrong, I'm bad. So I had to undo that wiring on a visceral level in my
Yeah,
body
I could see that.
around affection and sensuality. And
Okay,
the way I got through it was moving meditation.
how do you define sensuality? Because before we talked
Right.
about sovereign intimacy. So I'd love to hear your definition of your sensuality. And then why do you think reconnecting with your sensuality is so transformative and
Mm,
so important?
yes. So the way I'd like to frame sensuality is first by calling out the association that a lot of people make with sensuality, is
Mhm.
that it's automatically attached to sexuality.
Right. That's why I want your definition because I
Yeah,
didn't think
so
that was going to be the case.
sexuality for me in my definition would be a connection to our primal sexual energy that's being expressed through our bodies. And it's our also our eros. It's what makes us both our eros, sensuality and sexuality is eros. It's what makes us feel alive.
Mm,
It is our power when we lean into what is erotic to us. It's one of our greatest powers for feeling alive. That's for
mhm,
both sensuality and sexuality. But sensuality, unlike sexuality, in my view, is connected to all the senses in our bodies that aren't necessarily sexual. And they can be very pleasurable. They can be exciting or not
mm,
exciting. It can be calm, but it's basically everything that we feel through the senses of our skin. That can be so many things. So it's a much broader palette than sexuality in my perspective.
mhm,
Sensuality is the warmth in someone's gaze that
mm,
makes me feel something in my skin. Sensuality is, I think, one of my definitions in the book, and I could read it later, but it was this image of the cat's ears becoming erect, testing
mm.
the tension in the room to know whether it was safe to move forward. Sensuality is a power to be able to know whether and how we're safe, and also to know where we can, how to move into that greater energy of sexuality. It's
Wow.
such a rich informant.
Yeah.
So my definition of sensuality is very broad.
Yeah, but you know what? Actually, as I'm listening to you, if you pick apart the English language,
Hmm.
sensuality contains the word sense,
Yes.
senses.
Yes.
And the root of the word sensuality is sense and senses. So what you're really defining as sensuality is really taking the senses that we have within us, the physical on the inside that we feel, or a touch, or what you described at the cat's ear perking up to see what it hears. It's using its senses to go
Yes.
deeper and connect with the world that's going on around them.
Yes.
Very fascinating how we take that word sensuality and twist it to mean sexuality,
Yes.
when really it's not that. So almost, I think we almost answered the question that I asked, why reconnecting is so transformative.
It's our aliveness, and
Yeah.
it's also an informant to our bliss.
Yeah. Taking us deeper.
Bliss in a moment that we have access to in every moment is infinite, and it gets us out of our minds. and out of fight or flight in any moment.
Yeah.
Pleasure is always at our fingertips, and it's not in a sexual way. It's on our lips, it's on our face. If we just want to take a moment right now and feel what it feels like to touch our own fingers or our own skin, it's such a heightening and pleasurable experience if we
Yeah. If
just
you let it.
let it be.
Yeah. How can we cultivate bliss in the moment?
Hmm. For me, it's for sure slowing down. It's not engaging with other things, consuming other things, letting my mind be busy or distracted. It's going outside for a minute, closing my eyes and putting my face in the sun and feeling that and connecting with it and communing with it and allowing that to give me life
Mm,
simply by receiving it. It's so simple and it's such a rich resource for fulfillment.
yeah.
We don't need other people to feel it too, which is another beautiful quality about sensuality. It's such a personal and intimate way we can experience ourselves, as you said so beautifully, in interaction with the world around us.
Wow. Yeah, we don't need something else in there. Yeah,
No.
because if we're using our own senses in order to interact with the world around us and to go deeper to find and to really experience that bliss that, as you said, is at our fingertips, it
Yeah.
really doesn't
Yes.
require somebody else. I would imagine if somebody else was in that same state
Mhm.
of sensuality, also looking for their own bliss at the same time. And I'm thinking more of people who resonate on the same frequency, I would imagine it would be enhanced, would be just a taking it to a higher level, just allowing somebody else into your world and vice versa to experience life to its fullest. People have vibrational frequencies, resonating at a high frequency versus a low frequency or putting
Mhm.
off an aura about them. How do you view
Mm.
people in that capacity as far as their energies go? What does that look like to you?
Oh, for me, it looks like, again, noticing how I am feeling in the presence of a person. And this is a perfect segue because this whole notion of sensuality is really about presence and becoming really present with our
Mm,
sensations. So when I encounter another person, and I feel expanded inside. I feel a harmony within myself that I can feel in my senses. That's a frequency or energy, let's say, that I would feel drawn to, that I feel I want to move towards.
mm,
If I encounter someone who I experience as, where I feel a body experience or an inner experience of feeling contracted in some way or feeling just none of the other qualities in contrast. If it's
mm,
just an absence of expansion, it's also giving me information. So that's how I personally navigate this data download
mhm.
what energy someone is holding, because it's a real thing, and received from others is a very real thing. And I, to the best of my ability, make it a practice to lean towards those who I feel that
Yeah,
sense of joy.
yeah,
Expanded joy is my
yeah,
compass. And if it's not that, it's not that. So just don't
mm,
move towards it.
yeah, yeah.
Joy.
I like that. Yeah. You gravitate towards people you really wanna spend that time with, and you
Yeah.
enjoy being around them. As I was reading a little bit about you, I learned that you are someone who deeply values putting one foot in front of the other, along with this idea of freedom. So I wanna know, how do you stay grounded while balancing your creative endeavors, your personal growth, and professional success as well?
It's a very timely question, Sue. It's a very timely question because I'm in the midst of really feeling a lot of desire for building things right now.
Yeah.
And so putting one step in front of the other is a lot of checking myself when I start to feel overwhelmed. contracted or like I'm putting pressure on myself to
Uh-huh.
achieve. That for me is like a really big red flag. But it requires a lot of coming back to what's giving me pleasure in the moment and
Mhm.
not following the thoughts of I need to get that done
Mhm.
because it'll get me closer sooner, faster to where I want to go. And it requires a lot of humility, a
Yeah.
lot of humility to to recognize that I need to surrender to my ambition because really that's just my ideas of where I think what I need to do and what I need
Mhm.
where I need to go.
I'd love to know what's something that very few people agree with you on?
I have, I think, what some people might perceive as a very idealist lens on relationship,
Mm,
on intimate relationships, especially, but every relationship. And that is that I don't believe it's necessary or required to compromise. And what I mean
mm.
by that, again, this is another cultural language word that I feel needs to, my next edition of the Poetic Glossary, compromise is going to have 10 pages. Because
I love it, I can't wait.
I feel that the word compromise in our culture has been adopted to assume that there's some kind of mediation where people will give up something of themselves in order to gain something.
Mm,
And that innate understanding, an unquestioned belief that we need to give up something in order to win is something that I don't agree with.
mm,
I believe that we can come together and collaborate on common ground with common definition and understanding of what we're moving towards, even if two people want different things, and that it doesn't need to entail in any level self sacrifice or to
mm,
lose something, to pay a cost in order to gain something else.
mhm.
And I think it's a world lens that's systemic and a cancer in the way a lot of decisions are made between in relationship that causes resentment, and also, organizationally too, see that a lot.
It's amazing how fragile language is and how much of it can be misinterpreted,
Yes.
especially when you put two people in the same room and you're starting to talk about those words, for example, like compromise.
Yeah.
When you think about compromise, you think about, yeah, I do have to give up something in order to get something. Well, what if compromise actually has a slightly different definition to it, that you don't
Yeah.
have to give something up in order to receive. So
Right.
I think that's fascinating. I think if anything from our whole conversation to walk away with being more present in the
Mhm.
use of language, especially at those times when conflict occurs. And you
Yeah.
go back and ask yourself, wait a minute, is this conflict because of a misunderstanding? Is it because of a misinterpretation
Mhm.
of something, a definition of a word that we thought is defined one way and somebody is defining it a different way? So,
Right. Yeah, that's
yeah,
really
yeah,
beautifully said.
yeah. So, Raya, I'm totally enjoying our conversation. I can't wait for your next book, by the way. All of my guests, I ask them the same three questions. So, the first is, please share a book or a resource that has
Mhm.
had a significant impact on you.
Rumi is coming to mind right now because of the simplicity and the potency of what one line can offer and be so life
Mm,
changing. And the Rumi quote, which I do not have memorized, but it comes to mind right now, that has been something that I come back to over
mm,
and over and over again, is somewhere there is a field between right and wrong, and that's where I'll meet you. And that is not the quote, so I don't.
yeah.
I know I'm not doing the quote justice, but that's the meaning of it. And I come back to that over and over again in my life because, when we were talking about the inner landscape earlier, I feel when there's an interaction with two people, the field is huge that we can meet on. Just when we take away these associations with our beliefs and thoughts and associations with words or how we express ourselves, there's this infinite landscape of possibility, neutral and fun and enlivening and full of potential. And so that's definitely been a lifelong body of work. Rumi, there's many books that I have of his.
You know what I love about you? I love that your perspective on life is expansive.
Oh,
Absolutely. Just every interaction or every question that you answer, there's just always a bigger perspective to it. It's
hmm.
I love about that. My next question that I ask, I think it's gonna be a lot of fun here. What is one question or topic you wish I would have asked about, and how would you have answered the question or expanded on the topic?
Well, I think in relationship to what we're talking about with presence and how do we, or what we were just talking about earlier about coming back to presence and being in the moment when we're building, even doing things we love, like building a business we love or being in our creativity. For me, the topic that I would love to give more space to is the quality of surrender and what does that
Mm.
look like? Because all of us have our default patterns, right, of going towards our dreams and creating a schedule for ourselves, showing up for ourselves, doing all the things that we, at least this far in our lives, can identify as being good for ourselves.
Mhm, mhm.
But what does it look like when we're starting to feel pressure inside in any way and to not give up on what we're doing and to not get sidetracked, but to open to that pressure or pain and release it in the form of surrender?
I read The Surrender Experiment by Michael Singer, and that book was extremely transformative for me. And he talked about the concept of surrendering to the life that as it unfolds in front of you, rather than trying to make things happen, but rather allow the experiences and the opportunities that come to you as an invitation to
Mhm.
surrender to that opportunity, even if it wasn't something that you had envisioned.
Yes.
And that's another word that has multiple meanings. When you think of the word surrender at first, it actually has this really heavy connotation to it, like you're surrendering, you're giving up. But there's also a freedom contained within the word surrender
Yeah.
that allows you to not have the obligation to make things happen.
I really appreciate your language around that too. The when something is happening to you for you and the movements that happen internally to come to that understanding
And
absolutely needs to involve surrender on some
Well
level.
hopefully you'll put the word surrender in your next book. I would love
It's in
to.
this one.
Oh, is it in
It's
this one?
yeah, it's in this one. Yeah.
Okay.
I will say that with that one word, there's a couple of words in this book where I have felt at different points in my life since it's
Mm,
been released that I want to add to it.
yeah. Last question as we close. What is one small step that someone can do today that's gonna help them change their tomorrow?
Based on this conversation that we've had today, I would say giving yourself the grace to press pause, slow down, and just feel the pleasure of connecting with one sensation in the body that feels pleasurable or calming or, delightful, peaceful, and just have a minute with it. Just a minute. That can do wonders. And it's so accessible. So, so accessible.
Yeah. I could see that being a very small step that could have a profound impact on somebody's life.
Mhm.
So, how can people find you? How can they reach out to you?
I am on Instagram at Rhiah, Rhiah, and then it'll pop up. I won't, and I'm also online on my website at Krista Kujat. That's my birth name and my author name. And I invite people to go to my website because I'm currently offering free audios of selected pages from my book, so selected
Oh,
poems from my book,
oh wow.
that I really recommend as a moment to commune with the deeper meaning of these words, to cultivate presence, to cultivate that deeper knowing, the deeper truth. And also, I've had feedback on the different ways that people are using the book. And one of them has been right before bed, because it's an opening to connect with something that offers an opening to connect with that knowing and the calm
Mhm.
and expansiveness.
Oh, I love it. Well, Rhiah, thank you so much for the gift of your time. I have thoroughly enjoyed our conversation today.
Likewise, I'm so grateful for this invitation. It opens so many doors of richness that I never even could imagine. So thank you
Uh,
so much for your
Um,
beautiful questions.
oh, you're welcome. Thank you. Thank you for the gift of your time.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Small Steps, Big Wins podcast. I value your time with me and I seek to make every moment count. In order to make lasting change in your life, listening is usually not enough. So I want to ask you, what practical steps are you going to put into action today as a result of listening to this podcast? Remember, any step, any action, no matter how small, starts your journey to a big win. And if you're not sure where to get started, reach out to me and let's have a conversation. Until next time, love yourself, then love others. Peace.